10 Nights of Dreams. 10 dreams, 10 nights. Each one opens like a door left ajar, and something is always waiting just behind it. A dying woman promises to return in 100 years and asks you to wait for her beside her grave. A young samurai grinds his teeth toward enlightenment with a short sword laid against his side, one clock chime away from either salvation or a beheading. A blind child rides on his father's back down a rain-black road, patiently walking him toward a debt no one has paid in 100 years. Sōseki wrote these 10 pieces in a matter of weeks in the summer of 1908, and they read like nothing else he ever published. No plot to speak of, no moral, nothing but the particular logic of sleep, where a single image can mean everything and explain nothing at all. Read them the way you'd recall your own dreams the next morning. Vivid, faintly unsettling, and impossible to fully shake off. The first night. I had a dream like this. I was sitting with my arms folded beside a pillow, and the woman lying on her back beside me said, in a quiet voice, that she was going to die. Her long hair was spread across the pillow, and her soft-featured oval face lay nestled in it. Beneath her pale white cheeks, a warm color rose just enough, and her lips, of course, were red. She didn't look at all like someone about to die, and yet she said again, quite clearly, in that same quiet voice, that she was going to die. I found myself believing it. Yes, she really is going to die. So I leaned in and looked down at her and asked, "Is that so? Are you really going to die?" "Yes, I am," she said, and opened her eyes wide. They were large, moist eyes, and within the fringe of her long lashes was nothing but deep black. In the depths of that black, I could see my own reflection, vivid and clear. I gazed at the sheen of that black eye, so deep it seemed almost transparent, and thought again, how could someone with eyes like these be dying? I brought my mouth close to her pillow and asked once more, tenderly, "You're not really going to die, are you? You'll be all right?" She kept her black eyes open wide, sleepy as they looked, and answered in that same quiet voice, "But I am going to die. There's nothing to be done about it." "Then can you see my face?" I asked urgently. "Of course I can," she said. "Look, isn't it right there, reflected?" And she smiled. I said nothing and drew my face back from the pillow. With my arms still folded, I thought, is she really going to die? After a while, the woman spoke again. "When I die, please bury me. Dig a hole with a great pearl shell, and place a fragment of a star fallen from the sky as my grave marker. Then wait by my grave. I will come to see you again." I asked her when she would come. "The sun will rise," she said, "and then it will set, and then it will rise again, and set again. As the red sun falls from east to west, again and again. Will you wait for me?" I nodded without speaking. The woman raised her quiet voice a degree and said with sudden resolve, "Wait 100 years. Sit by my grave and wait 100 years. I will surely come to see you." I only answered that I would wait. Then the reflection of my own face, which had been so vivid in her black eyes, began to blur. As if still water had stirred and disturbed the image within it, it seemed to dissolve, and then her eyes closed with a soft snap. Tears slid down her cheeks from between her long lashes. She was already dead. I went down into the garden and dug a grave with the pearl shell.
It was a large shell with a smooth, sharp edge. Each time I scooped up the earth, moonlight caught the inside of the shell and glittered. The soil smelled damp. Before long, the hole was dug. I laid the woman inside it and gently covered her with the soft earth from above. Each time I added a scoop, moonlight flashed again inside the shell. Then I picked up the fallen fragment of a star and set it lightly atop the earth. The star fragment was round. I thought that as it fell through the vast sky for so long, its edges must have worn smooth. As I lifted it and set it upon the grave, my chest and hands grew slightly warm. I sat down on the moss. Thinking that I would have to wait like this for 100 years, I folded my arms and gazed at the round gravestone. Before long, just as the woman had said, the sun rose in the east, a great red sun. And then, just as she'd said, it set in the west. It sank, still red, in one slow, heavy drop. That's one, I counted. After a while, the crimson sun rose sluggishly again, and silently it set once more. 2. I counted again. Counting this way, one and then another, I lost track of how many red suns I'd seen. No matter how much I counted, I could not count them all. So many red suns passed overhead, and still the 100 years had not come. At last, gazing at the moss-covered round stone, I began to wonder if the woman had deceived me. Then, from beneath the stone, a green stem grew slantwise, leaning toward me. Before I knew it, it had grown long, reaching just to my chest, where it stopped. And then, at the tip of the softly swaying stem, a slender bud that had been tilting its head opened its petals, full and soft. A pure white lily, its fragrance so strong before my face that it seemed to reach my very bones. Just then, from far above, a drop of dew fell, and the flower swayed under its own weight. I leaned forward and pressed my lips to the cold, dew-wet white petals. As I drew my face away from the lily, I happened to glance up at the distant sky and saw the morning star, alone, twinkling. So the 100 years had already come, I realized, only then, for the first time. The second night. I had a dream like this. Leaving the abbot's chamber and walking back down the corridor to my own room, I found the lamp burning dimly. As I knelt on the cushion and reached to trim the wick, a clove-shaped bit of charred wick fell, flower-like, onto the vermilion lacquered stand. At the same instant, the room brightened suddenly. The painting on the sliding door was by Busang. Dark willows sketched thick and thin, near and far, and a fisherman, looking cold, crossing a levee with his hat tilted low. On the alcove wall hung the scroll of Monju Bodhisattva crossing the sea. The incense I had burned earlier still lingered faintly in the darker corners of the room. It was a large temple and utterly silent, not a soul stirring. The round shadow cast on the black ceiling by the round lamp seemed, the instant I looked up, to come alive. Still kneeling on one knee, I lifted the cushion with my left hand and reached underneath with my right. And there it was, just where I expected. Reassured, I smoothed the cushion back into place and sat heavily upon it. "You are a samurai," the abbot had said. "If you are a samurai, surely you are not incapable of enlightenment. Seeing as you remain unenlightened for so long," he'd said, "perhaps you are no samurai after all. A piece of human trash," he'd call me. "So you're angry now," he'd laughed. "If it galls you, then bring me proof that you've attained it," he'd said, and turned away. Insufferable. By the time the clock in the next room, the great room, strikes the next hour, I will attain enlightenment without fail. Once I have attained it, I will go to him again tonight for another audience, and I will trade his head for my enlightenment. If I cannot attain it, I cannot take the abbot's life. I must, no matter what, attain it. I am a samurai, and if I cannot attain it, I will kill myself. A samurai cannot go on living after being disgraced. I will die cleanly. As I thought this, my hand again moved unconsciously beneath the bedding and pulled out the short sword in its vermilion sheath. Gripping the hilt firmly, I swept the red sheath aside, and the cold blade flashed all at once in the dark room. Something fearsome seemed to slip away from my grip with a hiss, gathering entirely at the tip, concentrating its killing intent into a single point. Watching that sharp blade narrow, mercilessly, like the head of a needle, down to its 11-inch point, I suddenly wanted to plunge it in. Blood rushed to my right wrist, and the hilt grew slick in my grip. My lips trembled. I sheathed the blade and drew it close against my right side, then crossed my legs into full lotus. Joshu's word was mu. What is mu? Damned priest, I thought, grinding my teeth. I clenched my back teeth so hard that hot breath came roughly through my nose. My temples throbbed with pain. I opened my eyes twice as wide as usual. I could see the hanging scroll. I could see the lamp. I could see the tatami. I could see the abbot's bald, kettle-like head, vivid before me. I could even hear his crocodile mouth gaping open in mockery. Insufferable priest. Somehow that kettle head of his, I must have it. I will attain it. Mu, mu, I chanted with the root of my tongue. Even as I said mu, the smell of incense still reached me. Damn it, incense of all things. I suddenly clenched my fist and struck my own head as hard as I could. Then I ground my back teeth together, grinding. Sweat poured from both armpits. My back went rigid as a rod. The joints of my knees began to ache sharply. Let them break, I thought. What of it? And yet, it hurt. It was agony. Mu would not come. Just as I thought it was coming, the pain would flare again. I grew furious, resentful, bitterly, wretchedly frustrated. Tears welled and spilled. I wanted to hurl myself against some great boulder and smash my bones and flesh to pieces. Even so, I forced myself to sit still. I bore, deep in my chest, something almost unbearably painful, and endured it. That painful thing pressed up from beneath through every muscle in my body, straining to burst out through my very pores, but everywhere was sealed shut, and there was, in this cruel and merciless state, no way out at all. Before long, my mind grew strange. The lamp, Busan's painting, the tatami, the staggered shelves, all seemed at once to exist and not exist, to not exist and yet exist. And still, Mu did not appear before me at all. I seemed to be sitting there for no reason whatsoever. Then, suddenly, the clock in the next room began to chime. I started. My right hand went at once to the short sword. The clock struck its second note. The third night. I had a dream like this. I was carrying a 6-year-old child on my back. It was, without question, my own child. And yet, strangely, at some point its eyes had gone blind, and its head had been shaved like a young monk's. When I asked, "When did your eyes go blind?" it answered, "Oh, long ago." The voice was unmistakably a child's, but the way it spoke was entirely that of an adult, and, what's more, as an equal. On either side lay green rice paddies. The path was narrow. Now and then the shadow of a heron cut through the darkness. "We've reached the rice fields, haven't we?" it said from my back. "How can you tell?" I asked, turning my face back toward it. "Because the heron is crying, isn't it?" it answered. And just then the heron did indeed cry out, twice. I felt, though it was my own child, a rising fear. Carrying a thing like this on my back, there was no telling what might happen. Wasn't there somewhere I could cast it off? Looking ahead into the darkness, I saw a great forest. If only there, I thought. And at that very moment, from my back came a voice. It said. "What are you laughing at?" The child gave no answer, only asked, "Father, am I heavy?" "You're not heavy," I answered. "You'll find me heavy soon enough," it said. I said nothing and walked on toward the forest as my mark. The path through the paddies wound irregularly, and I could not make the progress I wanted. Before long, it forked into two. "There should be a stone standing there," the little monk said. Sure enough, a stone about 9 inches square stood about waist high. On its face, in red characters, were written, "Left to Higakubo, right to Hotahara." Though it was dark, the red characters were plainly visible. The red was the color of a newt's belly. "Left is better," the little monk commanded. I looked left and saw that the same forest from before was casting its dark shadow down from the high sky onto our heads. I hesitated a moment. "No need to hold back," the little monk said again. Helplessly, I began walking toward the forest. In my mind, I thought, how strange, blind as he is, that he knows everything so well. And as I approached the forest along the single path, the voice at my back said, "It really is inconvenient, being blind. That's why I'm carrying you, isn't it? So it's fine." I'm grateful to be carried, but it's no good being mocked by people. Even my own parent mocks me. That's what's no good. Something in me turned unpleasant. I quickened my pace, wanting only to reach the forest and be rid of him. "A little further and you'll understand." "It was a night just like this one," the little monk murmured, as if to itself from my back. "What was?" I asked, my voice sharp with unease. "What was, you ask? You already know, don't you?" the child answered, mocking. And somehow I did feel I knew, but I couldn't say clearly what. I only felt that it had been a night just like this one, and that if I walked a little further, I would understand, and that once I understood, it would be terrible. So before I understood, I had to cast him off quickly and be at ease. I quickened my pace all the more. The rain had been falling for some time now. The path grew darker and darker. I moved almost without thought. Only the small child clinging to my back seemed to illuminate my entire past, present, and future, sparing not the smallest fact, shining like a mirror. And this thing was my own child, and it was blind. I could bear it no longer. "Here, here, right at the foot of that cedar." The little monk's voice was perfectly clear, even in the rain. Without meaning to, I stopped. Somehow, I had already entered the forest. The black shape some 6 feet ahead was, just as the child said, unmistakably a cedar tree. Father, it was right at the root of that cedar, wasn't it? Yes, that's right, I answered before I could stop myself. It was the 5th year of Bunka, the year of the dragon, wasn't it? Indeed, it seemed to me that it was. It's been exactly 100 years since you killed me, hasn't it? The moment I heard these words, the realization struck my mind all at once that 100 years ago, in the 5th year of Bunka, the year of the dragon, on a dark night just like this one, at the root of this very cedar, I had murdered a blind man. I am a murderer, I realized for the first time, and at that very instant, the child on my back grew suddenly heavy as a stone Jizo. The 4th night. In the middle of a wide, earthen-floored room stood something like a bench with small stools arranged around it. The bench had a black, well-worn shine to it. In one corner, an old man sat alone before a square tray, drinking. The side dish looked like simmered vegetables. The old man was pleasantly flushed from the drink. On top of that, his whole face had a healthy sheen, without so much as a wrinkle to be seen anywhere. Only from the full white beard he wore could one tell that he was old. I, still a child, wondered just how old this old man could be. Just then, the woman, who had come back from fetching water at the drain pipe out back with a bucket, wiped her hands on her apron and asked, "Grandpa, how old are you?" The old man swallowed the mouthful of simmered food he'd been chewing and said, quite unconcerned, "I've forgotten how old." The woman stood there with her wiped hands tucked into her narrow sash, looking sideways at the old man's face. The old man took a great gulp of sake from something like a rice bowl, then let out a long breath through his white beard. Then the woman asked, "Grandpa, where's your home?" The old man cut his long breath short and said, "In the depths of my navel." The woman, hands still tucked in her narrow sash, asked again, "Where are you going?" The old man then took another great gulp of the hot sake from his rice bowl-sized cup, let out the same breath as before, and said, "Over there." "Straight there?" the woman asked, and just as she did, the breath he'd blown out passed straight through the paper screen, past the willow tree below, and headed straight toward the riverbank. The old man stepped outside. I followed after him. A small gourd hung at his waist. A square box hung slung under his arm from his shoulder. He wore pale indigo trousers and a pale indigo sleeveless jacket. Only his tabby socks were yellow. They looked, somehow, as if made of leather. The old man walked straight to beneath the willow tree. Beneath the willow, 3 or 4 children were gathered. The old man, smiling, drew a pale indigo hand towel from his waist. He twisted it lengthwise, like a rope for a Shinto ceremony, and laid it in the middle of the ground. Then around the towel, he drew a great circle. Finally, from the box slung at his shoulder, he took out a brass candy seller's flute. "Now that towel's about to turn into a snake. Watch closely. Watch closely," he said again and again. The children stared intently at the towel. So did I. Watch closely, all right," the old man said, and began to play the flute, walking in circles around the ring. I kept my eyes only on the towel, but the towel did not move at all. The old man blew the flute, peep, peep, and walked around the circle again and again. He walked on tiptoe, as if creeping, as if deferring politely to the towel. It looked frightening. It also looked delightful. At last the old man stopped the flute abruptly. Then he opened the lid of the box slung at his shoulder, picked up the towel's end with a pinch, and dropped it in. "Left in here, it'll turn into a snake inside the box. I'll show you soon, I'll show you soon," he said, and began walking straight ahead. He passed beneath the willow and went straight down the narrow path. Wanting to see the snake, I followed him down the narrow path, no matter how far it went. The old man walked on, saying now and then, "Soon now," or "It'll be a snake." At last he began to sing. "Soon now, a snake it'll be. Sure as sure, the flute plays free." And so singing, he came at last to the riverbank. There was no bridge, no boat, so I thought he would surely rest here and show us the snake in the box. But the old man waded straight into the river, splash after splash. At first the water was only knee-deep, but gradually it rose past his waist, up toward his chest, and he disappeared from view. Still the old man sang. "Deeper it goes, night comes on, straight ahead, and walked on, straight ahead no matter what. And then his beard, his face, his head, his hood, all of it vanished entirely from sight. I stood where the reeds rustled and waited all alone, for however long it took, thinking that surely once the old man reached the far shore, he would show us the snake. But the old man never came back up. Not ever. The fifth night. I had a dream like this. It was some very ancient time, close to the age of the gods, it seemed. I had gone to war and, through misfortune, been defeated, and was taken alive and brought before the enemy general. The people of that age were all tall, and all of them wore long beards. They wore leather belts from which hung sword-like blades, straight as rods. Their bows appeared to be simply thick wisteria vines, used as they were. Neither lacquered nor polished, extremely crude things. The enemy general gripped the middle of his bow with his right hand, planted it in the grass, and sat upon something like an overturned sake jar. Looking at his face, I saw that above his nose, his left and right eyebrows joined into one thick line. Of course, in that age, there was no such thing as a razor. Being a prisoner, I could not sit upon anything. I sat cross-legged on the grass. On my feet, I wore large straw boots. The straw boots of that era were deep things. Standing, they reached to the knee. At the edge, the straw was left unwoven in places, hanging down like a fringe which rustled and swayed as one walked, serving as a decoration. The general looked at my face by the light of the bonfire and asked whether I would die or live. This was the custom of the time. Every prisoner was asked this as a matter of course. To answer, "I will live," meant surrender. To say, "I will die," meant refusal to submit. I answered in a single word, "I will die." The general flung the bow he had planted in the grass off to one side and began to draw the rod-straight blade at his waist with a ring. The wind-blown bonfire light struck it from the side. I opened my right hand wide like a maple leaf, turned my palm toward the general, and raised it before my eyes, a sign to wait. The general clacked the thick blade back into its sheath. Even in that age, there was love. I said that before I died, I wished to see, just once, the woman I loved. The general said he would wait until dawn, until the cock crowed. I had to summon the woman here before the cock crowed. If the cock crowed and she had not come, I would be killed without seeing her. The general remained seated, gazing at the bonfire. I sat in the grass, my great straw boots crossed before me, waiting for the woman. The night grew steadily deeper. Now and then came a sound of the bonfire collapsing. Each time it collapsed, the flames seemed to stagger and lean toward the general, as if in panic. Beneath his black, heavy brows, the general's eyes gleamed. Then someone would come and toss more branches onto the fire. After a while, the fire would crackle and pop, a brave sound, as if pushing back against the darkness. At this moment, the woman led out the white horse tethered to the oak tree behind her house. Stroking its mane 3 times, she leapt lightly onto its tall back. There was no saddle, no stirrup, a bareback horse. With her long white legs, she kicked its round belly, and the horse broke at once into a full gallop. Someone had added more wood to the fire, so that the distant sky glowed faintly bright. The horse flew through the darkness, making for that glow. From its nostrils came 2 pillars of breath like fire as it flew. And still, the woman kicked ceaselessly at the horse's belly with her slender legs. The horse flew so fast that the sound of its hooves seemed to ring in midair. The woman's hair streamed out behind her in the darkness like a banner in the wind. And still, she could not reach the place where the bonfire was. Then, suddenly, beside the pitch-dark road came the sound. Cock-a-doodle-doo! The woman threw her body backward and with both hands wrenched hard on the rein she held. The horse dug its forehoof sharply into the hard rock. Cock-a-doodle-doo! The cock crowed once more. The woman cried out and let the tightened reins go slack all at once. The horse buckled at both knees. Rider and mount together pitched forward, headlong. Beneath the rock was a deep chasm. The mark of the hooves remains on that rock even now. The one who mimicked the cock's crow was Amano-jaku. For as long as that hoofprint remains carved in the rock, Amano-jaku is my enemy. The 6th night. I heard that Unki was carving the Neo guardian statues at the gate of Gokokuji Temple, and it was the talk of the town, so I went to see, out for a stroll. When I arrived, a large crowd had already gathered ahead of me, buzzing with opinions. Some 5 or 6 kin in front of the temple gate stood a great red pine, its trunk leaning diagonally to hide the gate's tiled roof, its branches stretching up into the distant blue sky. The green of the pine and the vermilion of the gate set each other off beautifully, and the pine's position was perfect. The left edge of the gate had been cut on a slant so as not to obstruct the view, widening as it rose, jutting out all the way up to the roof line. There was something pleasantly archaic about it. It might have been from the Kamakura period. And yet everyone watching was, like myself, a person of the Meiji era. Among them, rickshaw men made up the largest number. No doubt they were waiting idly at a corner and had nothing better to do than stand and watch. "That's a big one said. "Must be harder work than making a person," said another. Then again, one man said, "A Neo, is it? They still carve Neo these days? Is that so? I always figured all the Neo around were old ones." Another man spoke up. "Sure looks strong, don't he? Say what you like, but there's never been anyone stronger than a Neo, they say. Stronger even than Yamato Takeru no Mikoto, they say." This man had his coat tucked up at the hem and wore no hat. He looked distinctly uneducated. Unki paid not the slightest attention to the crowd's commentary, moving his chisel and mallet steadily. He never so much as glanced their way. Perched up high, he was carving away steadily at the area around the Neo's face. Unki wore a small, eboshi-like cap on his head and had the wide sleeves of what might have been a suo robe tied back behind him. His whole manner had an air of great antiquity about it. utterly out of keeping with the chattering crowd of onlookers. I wondered how it was that Unky was still alive at this late date. Thinking it a strange thing indeed, I nevertheless stayed and kept watching. Unky himself, however, showed not the least sign of finding it strange or wondrous, and simply carved on with total absorption. One young man who had been gazing up at this attitude turned to me and said, "That's Unky for you. There's no us in his eyes. His attitude is that the only heroes under heaven are the Neo and himself." Splendid. I found this remark interesting. As I glanced toward the young man, he went on without missing a beat. "Look at the way he handles that chisel and mallet. He's reached the realm of perfect mastery." Just then, Unky had carved a thick eyebrow, cutting it out horizontally about an inch high. In the instant he turned the chisel's edge vertical, he brought the mallet down diagonally from above. He shaved off a piece of the hard wood in a single stroke, and as the thick wood chip flew off with the sound of the mallet, the flared side of the angry, flaring nostril suddenly rose up before us. The way he drove the blade in was utterly fearless, and he seemed to harbor not the slightest doubt. To use the chisel so freely and still get eyebrows and a nose just as you'd want them, I said to myself, half aloud, in genuine admiration. The young man beside me spoke up again. "No, he's not making the eyebrows and nose with the chisel. Those eyebrows and that nose are already buried in the wood, just as they are, and he's merely digging them out with the power of chisel and mallet. It's just like digging a stone out of the earth. There's no way to go wrong." Only then did it occur to me that this was what sculpture was. If that were so, then anyone could do it. I suddenly wanted to try carving the Neo myself, so I gave up watching and hurried straight home. I took a chisel and hammer from the toolbox and went out back, where I found a great pile of oak logs, cut into manageable lengths by the woodcutter for firewood after the oak had blown down in a storm some time back. I chose the largest one and began carving away eagerly, but unfortunately no Neo was to be found, nor, unluckily, in the next one, nor in the third. I carved through the piled firewood, one piece after another, but not one of them concealed a Neo within. At last I realized, no Neo is buried in the wood of the Meiji era after all. And with that, I understood, more or less, the reason Unky is still alive today. The seventh night. Somehow, I found myself aboard a great ship. Day and night, without the slightest pause, this ship belched black smoke and cut through the waves, forging ahead. The sound was tremendous, but where it was bound, I had no idea. Only, from the bottom of the waves, a sun like a red-hot poker would rise. It would climb until it hung for a while directly above the tall mast, and then, before I knew it, it would overtake the great ship and go on ahead. And at last, with a hiss like a poker plunged into water, it would sink again beneath the waves. Each time, the blue waves far off would seethe and boil up in a deep crimson. And each time, the ship would give its tremendous roar and chase after it. But it could never catch up. Once I caught hold of one of the ship's crew and asked him, "Is this ship headed west?" The crewman looked at me with a puzzled expression for a while, and then asked, "Why?" "Because it seems to be chasing the setting sun." The crewman laughed, a great hollow laugh, and walked off toward the other side, chanting, "The sun that sets in the west, does it rise then in the east? Is that the truth? The sun that rises in the east, is its home then in the west? Is that too the truth? This body rides upon the waves, pillow on the rudder. Let it flow, let it flow." Going up to the bow, I found a great many sailors gathered, hauling on the thick ropes of the sails. I grew terribly uneasy. There was no telling when I would ever set foot on land again, and I had no idea where we were bound. All I knew for certain was that the ship went on belching black smoke, cutting through the waves. Those waves were exceedingly vast, endlessly blue as far as the eye could see. At times they turned purple. Only in the ship's immediate wake was the water always churned up into white foam. I felt terribly forlorn. Rather than remain on a ship like this, I thought, I might as well throw myself in and die. There were a great many passengers aboard. Most of them seemed to be foreigners, but their faces were all different, all manner of kinds. When the sky clouded over and the ship rolled, one woman stood leaning against the railing, weeping without pause. The handkerchief she used to wipe her eyes looked white, but her body was dressed in something like a calico print Western dress. Seeing this woman, it struck me I was not the only one who was sad. One night, out on the deck, gazing up at the stars alone, a foreigner came up and asked whether I knew astronomy. I was so weary of everything that I was even thinking of dying. I had no need of astronomy. I said nothing. Then the foreigner told me about the 7 stars at the crown of Taurus, and he said that the stars and the sea alike were all made by God. Finally, he asked whether I believed in God. I looked up at the sky and said nothing. Another time I went into the saloon and found a fashionably dressed young woman with her back to me, playing the piano. Beside her stood a tall, handsome man singing. His mouth looked enormous, and yet the two of them seemed utterly unconcerned with anything beyond themselves. It was as if they had forgotten they were even aboard a ship at all. I grew more and more weary of it all. At last, I resolved to die. So one night, when there was no one about, I made up my mind and flung myself into the sea. But the very instant my foot left the deck, the instant the ship and I were severed, suddenly my life became precious to me. From the bottom of my heart, I thought, I should not have done this. But it was too late. Whether I wished it or not, I had to go into the sea. Only, the ship must have been built very high, for though my body had left the deck, my feet did not easily reach the water. Yet there was nothing to hold on to, and little by little I drew nearer to the water. No matter how I drew my legs up, it kept coming closer. The water was black, and all the while the ship, as ever, belched its black smoke and passed on by. Only then did I understand, for the first time, that even a ship whose destination I did not know was better to be aboard than not. And yet, unable to make any use of that understanding, I fell silently into the black waves, carrying with me an infinite regret and terror. The 8th night. The moment I stepped across the threshold of the barber shop, 3 or 4 men in white coats standing clustered together all said, "Welcome," at once. Standing in the middle and looking around, I saw it was a square room. Windows were open on 2 sides, and mirrors hung on the other 2. I counted the mirrors. There were 6. I went and sat down in front of one of them. My weight sank into the seat with a soft, springy squish. It was a chair built with real comfort in mind. My face was reflected clearly in the mirror. Behind my face, I could see the window, and beyond that, at an angle, the reception counter. There was no one inside the counter's lattice screen. Through the window, I could clearly see the upper halves of the passers-by on the street. Shotaro walked by with a woman. At some point, Shotaro had bought himself a Panama hat and was wearing it. And the woman, too. When had he acquired her? I couldn't quite tell. Both of them looked terribly pleased with themselves. I meant to get a good look at the woman's face, but they had already passed by. A tofu seller went by blowing his horn. Because he had the horn pressed to his mouth, his cheek was puffed out, as if stung by a bee. He passed by, still puffed out like that, and it troubled me endlessly. I felt as though he would spend his whole life being stung by a bee. A geisha appeared. She had not yet done her makeup. Her Shimada hairstyle had loosened at the base, giving her head a slack, untidy look. Her face, too, looked half asleep. Her complexion was pitifully poor. She bowed and said something like, "Well, if you would." But no matter what, the person she was addressing never appeared in the mirror. Then a large man in a white coat came up behind me, holding scissors and a comb, and began studying my head. I twisted the thin mustache on my lip and asked whether it would turn out all right. "Well now, what about the hair too? Will it turn out all right?" I asked the man in white. The man in white said nothing and tapped my head lightly with the amber-colored comb he held. I meant to watch every reflection in the mirror without missing one and kept my eyes wide open. But each time the scissors clicked, black hair came flying, and it grew frightening. So before long, I closed my eyes. Then the man in white said this, "Sir, did you happen to see the goldfish seller out front?" I said I hadn't. The man in white said nothing more after that, and simply went on clicking his scissors busily. Then suddenly someone shouted loudly, "Watch out!" Startled, I opened my eyes, and beneath the white man's sleeve I saw the wheel of a bicycle. I saw the shaft of a rickshaw. And just then the man in white pressed both hands to my head and forced it sharply to one side. The bicycle and the rickshaw vanished from view entirely. The scissors went on clicking. Before long, the man in white moved around to my side and began cutting around my ear. Since the hair no longer flew forward, I opened my eyes, reassured. Just then, close by, came a voice calling out, "Awa mochi, mochi, mochi," and I could hear the rhythmic beat of a small pestle striking a mortar as someone pounded rice cakes in time. I had only ever seen a millet cake seller as a child, so I wanted a glimpse. But the millet cake seller never once appeared in the mirror. Only the sound of the pounding continued. I strained my eyes as far as they would go, trying to peer into the very corner of the mirror. And then, inside the reception counter, I saw, when it she appeared, a woman sitting. A dark-complexioned, thick-browed, large-framed woman. Her hair done up in an ichogaishi style, wearing a plain lined kimono with a black satin collar, sitting with one knee raised, counting bills. They looked like 10-yen notes. The woman kept her long lashes lowered and her thin lips pressed together, counting the bills with total concentration, and the speed of her counting was extraordinary. And yet the number of bills never seemed to run out, no matter how long she counted. What sat on her knee was, at most, 100 bills or so, but no matter how long she counted, it remained 100. I stared, transfixed, at this woman's face, and at the 10-yen notes. Just then, close to my ear, the man in white said loudly, "Let's wash it now." Just at that convenient moment, the instant I rose from the chair, I turned to look back toward the reception counter. But behind the lattice, there was neither woman nor money. Nothing at all. I paid the bill and stepped outside, and on the left side of the doorway, there were 5 or 6 oval tubs lined up, filled with red goldfish, mottled goldfish, thin goldfish and fat goldfish, a great many of them. And the goldfish seller sat behind them. The goldfish seller sat staring fixedly at the goldfish arranged before him, resting his chin on his hand, utterly still. He seemed to pay almost no mind to the bustling activity of the street. I stood there for a while, watching this goldfish seller. But the whole time I watched, the goldfish seller never moved at all. The ninth night. The world had somehow grown restless. It felt as though war might break out at any moment. It felt as though horses set loose from burned-out stables were roaming around the grounds night and day, and that foot soldiers were swarming after them night and day in pursuit. And yet, within the house itself, all was hushed and still. In the house lived a young mother and her 3-year-old child. The father had gone off somewhere. He had left on a night with no moon. He put on straw sandals on the floor, put on a black hood, and went out through the kitchen door. At that moment, the light of the paper lantern the mother held cast a long, thin beam into the dark night, illuminating the old cypress tree just before the hedge. The father never came back after that. Every day the mother asked her 3-year-old, "Where is father?" The child said nothing. After a while it began to answer, "Over there." When the mother asked, "When will he come home?" it still answered, "Over there," and laughed. At those times the mother would laugh too, and she taught it over and over, countless times, the words, "He'll be home soon." But the child only ever learned the word soon. Sometimes when asked, "Where is father?" it would simply answer, "Soon." At night, once the neighborhood had grown quiet, the mother would retie her sash, tuck a short sword in its shark-skin sheath into it, bind the child to her back with a narrow sash cord, and slip quietly out through the side gate. The mother always wore straw sandals. Sometimes the child would fall asleep on her back, listening to the sound of these sandals. Going west along the road lined with earthen walls of samurai residences, down the gently sloping hill, at the bottom stood a great ginkgo tree. Using this ginkgo as a landmark, she would turn right, and about 120 yards further in stood a stone torii gate. On one side lay rice paddies, on the other, nothing but dwarf bamboo, until she reached the torii and, passing through it, entered a dark grove of cedars. From there, following some 40 yards of stepping stones, she would come out before the steps of an old shrine hall. Above the offering box, worn to a grayish color, hung the great bell rope, and by day beside the bell hung a plaque reading Hachiman-gu, the character for 8 formed amusingly like 2 facing doves. There were various other plaques as well. Most of them bore the names of the family retainers who had shot a bullseye appended to the target itself. Occasionally there was also a dedicated sword. Passing through the torii, an owl was always crying somewhere in the tops of the cedars, and the sound of her plain straw sandals went pit-pat, pit-pat. When that sound stopped before the shrine hall, the mother would first ring the bell, then immediately crouch and clap her hands together. At that moment, more often than not, the owl would suddenly fall silent. Then, with utter single-mindedness, the mother would pray for her husband's safety. In the mother's mind, since her husband was a samurai, if she made this desperate plea to Hachiman, the god of the bow and arrow, surely it could not go unheard. So she believed with all her heart. The child would often wake at the sound of the bell, and finding everything pitch dark around it, would suddenly begin to cry on her back. At such times the mother, still murmuring some prayer under her breath, would rock her back to try to soothe it. Sometimes this worked, and it would stop crying. Other times it would only cry harder. Either way, the mother would not easily rise from her prayer. Once she had finished praying in a general way for her husband's safety, she would then untie the sash cord and, sliding the child down from her back to the front, hold it in both arms as she climbed the steps of the shrine hall, saying, "Be a good child now, and wait just a little while," pressing her cheek firmly against the child's cheek. Then she would lengthen the sash cord, bind the child with it, and tie the other end to the railing of the shrine hall. After that, she would descend the steps again and pace back and forth over the 40 yards of stepping stones, performing her 100 circuits of prayer. The child, tied to the shrine hall, would crawl about on the wide veranda in the darkness, as far as the length of the cord allowed. For the mother, those were, in a way, the easier nights. But if the bound child began to cry, oh, how it cried! The mother could not sit still. Her pace during the 100 circuits would grow terribly fast. Her breath would come in ragged gasps. When there was truly nothing else to be done, she would climb back up to the shrine hall midway through, soothe the child in various ways, and then begin her 100 circuits all over again. And so night after night, while the mother fretted and worried, sleepless over her husband, that husband had, long before, already been killed by a masterless samurai. This sad tale I heard in the dream from the mother herself. The 10th night. On the 7th night, after Shotaro was carried off by a woman, he came wandering back home, and Ken-san came to tell me that he'd suddenly taken a fever and collapsed into bed. Shotaro is the best-looking man in the whole neighborhood, and an extremely honest, upstanding fella besides. He had just one vice. He would put on his Panama hat and in the evening sit himself down in front of the fruit stand and stare at the faces of the women passing by. And he would go on and on admiring them. Apart from that, he had no particular distinguishing traits to speak of. When there weren't many women passing, he would look at the fruit instead of the street. The fruit stand carried all sorts: juicy peaches, apples, loquats, bananas, arranged beautifully in baskets, 2 rows deep, ready to be carried off as gifts at a moment's notice. Shotaro would look at these baskets and declare them beautiful. If he were ever to go into business, he said, it would have to be a fruit shop. And yet he himself simply idled about in his Panama hat, doing nothing at all. Sometimes he would praise the color of things like a summer mandarin. But he had never once in his life paid money to buy any fruit. Of course, he never ate any without paying either. He only ever admired the colors. One evening, a woman suddenly stopped in front of the shop. She was dressed elegantly, evidently a woman of some standing. Shotaro took an immediate liking to the color of her kimono, and what's more, he was tremendously struck by the woman's face. So he took off his precious Panama hat and bowed politely, and the woman pointed to the largest of the baskets and said she'd like that one. So Shotaro immediately picked it up and handed it to her. The woman lifted it for a moment to test its weight and said, "My, how heavy this is." Shotaro, being both a man of leisure and a rather easygoing sort by nature, said, "Well then, allow me to carry it to your home," and left the fruit shop together with the woman. He never came back after that. Even for someone as carefree as Shotaro, this was really too much. Something must be wrong, his relatives and friends said, growing alarmed. And then, on the 7th evening, he came wandering back home. So everyone gathered around and asked, "Sho, where on earth have you been?" And Shotaro answered that he had gotten on a streetcar and gone to the mountains. It must have been an extraordinarily long streetcar ride. According to what Shotaro said, the moment he got off the streetcar, he found himself out in an open field. It was an immense field, and no matter which way he looked, nothing grew there but green grass. Walking across the grass together with the woman, he suddenly came out at the top of a sheer cliff. At that point, the woman told Shotaro, "Why don't you jump from here?" He looked down and could see the cliff face, but no bottom. Shotaro took off his Panama hat again and declined more than once. Then the woman asked, "If you refuse to work up the resolve to jump, would you be all right with being licked by a pig?" Now, Shotaro hated two things above all else: pigs and the singer Kumoemon. But he thought his life was worth more, so he still held off on jumping. Just then, a pig came trotting up, snorting through its nose. Shotaro had no choice but to strike the pig's snout with the slender beetle palm walking stick he was carrying. The pig gave a sort of groan and toppled right over, tumbling down off the cliff. Shotaro had just managed to let out a breath of relief when another pig came up, rubbing its huge snout against him. Shotaro, with no other choice, raised his walking stick once more. The pig gave a groan and went tumbling head first down into the chasm as well. Then another appeared. At this point, Shotaro happened to look up and saw that from the far end of the vast green grass field, an uncountable number of pigs, tens of thousands of them, were coming in a single line, snorting, straight toward him where he stood atop the cliff. Shotaro was truly dismayed, but there was nothing else to be done, so he went on carefully striking the snout of each approaching pig, one after another, with his beetle palm walking stick. Strangely enough, the moment the stick so much as touched a pig's snout, the pig would tumble right over into the valley below. Looking down, he could see, in that bottomless cliff, an endless procession of upside-down pigs falling and falling. Realizing how many pigs he had already sent tumbling down, Shotaro himself grew frightened. But still the pigs kept coming, like black clouds sprouting legs, trampling through the green grass with tremendous force. An inexhaustible number of them came snorting toward him. Shotaro, summoning a desperate courage, went on striking the pigs' snouts for what felt like 6 or 7 days and nights. But at last, his strength gave out entirely. His hands went weak and limp as koniaku, and finally, he was licked by a pig. And with that, he collapsed atop the cliff. Ken-san, having told the story up to this point, said, "That's why it's no good to go around staring at women so much." I thought he had a point. But Ken-san also mentioned that he'd like to have Shotaro's Panama hat. Shotaro probably won't pull through. The Panama, I suppose, would go to Ken-san.